We have Robert Hockensmith, Bob. He's a certified public accountant. What I found that was interesting, in 1972, he joined, where is Bob? Is it the Army? Marines and Army. He said military, so it was kind of, which one is it, you know? So he goes Marines, Army. He comes out in '08 as a colonel. So I'm going, all right, man, we got a colonel here going to explain it to us. How did a colonel become a certified public accountant? You know, I want to hear about that one. And, of course, we got tax time coming up. And is there something you can do for last year? Is there something you can start doing now for this year? Well, we're going to find out. And what I wanted to make sure that you knew is that he's known on the web as AZ Money Guy. Well, hopefully we're going to be able to get some more money. And his wife, Devin, is a nutritionist and a professional athlete, and that's probably how Mark knows you guys. Bob, let me make sure I can say, tell me if I say this wrong. Hockensmith? Hockensmith. Bob, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good morning, folks. Have to excuse my voice here for a little bit. I'm trying to get over this cold. So I got to tell you, I enjoyed your talk. It was pretty interesting. There are two states that are repopulating, South Dakota and Utah. You can imagine why, right? So those are the two states in the United States that are actually repopulating sufficiently to grow the population. Yeah, that's the only two. I thought that was pretty interesting. So, can I speak loudly here? Little baby boy, little baby girl in the maternity ward. Little baby girl. No? Oh. Can I just pick it up?
Yeah. Pull it out.
Little baby boy, little baby girl in the maternity ward. The little baby girl, she turns to the boy and she goes, "Hey, you a boy or a girl?" The boy very proudly sticks his chest out and he goes, "I'm a boy, of course." The little girl looks at him and goes, "Well, how the heck do you know?" The little boy very proudly sticks his chest out, rips back the covers and goes, "See? Blue booties." Thought you knew where it was going, didn't you? One more. This lady's getting out of the shower, and her husband's jumping into the shower. About the same time this happens, the doorbell rings. So the lady puts a towel around herself and runs down to the doorbell to see who's at the door. It's their neighbor, Bob. Bob looks at her for a second and goes, "Hey, tell you what, I'll give you $800 to drop that towel." She thinks for a second, drops the towel accidentally, picks it back up and says, "Oh my God." He gives her $800. She runs back upstairs and he closes the door. So up in the shower, the husband goes, "Who was at the door?" The wife goes, "It was Bob, our next door neighbor." He goes, "Do you say anything about the $800 he owes me?" What's the moral of the story here? The moral of the story is you got to know the whole picture, right? You got to know the whole picture. I tell my clients, I tell my students, because I teach at the University of Phoenix, I teach at Grand Canyon, and if you see me on TV, I'm on channel 15 usually, and I tell everybody, you got to know all of it. You got to know the whole story here in order to be able to make good decisions. Gosh, I'm really sorry, folks. Well, I finally wrote a book. My wife's been after me for years and years and years to write a book. And I did. I finally wrote a book. It's called 52 Pickup Tax Tips to Save You Money Each Week. This includes the new Tax Cut and Jobs Act law. Brand new. I mean, literally, this was delivered to the house yesterday. So I'll be making that available if you guys are interested in it. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about some of the new tax laws and how they may affect you. So, one of the things that I noted is that medical expenses are far more deductible than people realize. Do you know that a lot of people think that plastic surgery is not a tax deduction? That's not true. You can have cosmetic elective surgery if it is to heal an injury or to help a disease. And it's completely tax deductible. That's not a disease. That's a lifelong commitment. Hair transplants. I'll give you a great example. A lot of people think, well, I can't get a tax deduction for hair transplants. That's not a tax deduction. That's an elective surgery. What causes the loss of hair? Now, my grandfather would tell you it's called getting older, learning more, and your brain expands. And as your brain expands, you lose hair. So those of us with less hair have more brains. Eh? The reality is there's something called DHT that actually increases in male and female, and it causes your hair to actually thin and die over time. Some people have more DHT than others. And if you have a lot of DHT, you typically have a lot more testosterone in your system. So you see people with, typically it's males, but sometimes females. You typically see males balding faster than females. I actually defended a case before the IRS where we took the client's hair transplants as a tax deduction. The IRS said, no, you can't do that, and we won. Because we proved that it was curing an injury, illness, or disease. So we actually won from that one. I want you to be aware of that. Do you know that you do not have to have a medical license in order to practice forms of medicine? And if somebody goes to a practitioner and it's for their medical condition to help alleviate pain or injury, that cost is tax deductible, i.e. massage therapy. That's a tax deduction, as long as you are helping somebody alleviate an injury, illness, or disease. So there's a lot of deductions out there that people think they cannot take. Worse yet, there's a lot of deductions out there people think they can take and they cannot. This is why you want to use a professional. Now, I don't know if you guys know who Dave Ramsey is, but I listen to Dave Ramsey. I follow Dave Ramsey. I've met Dave Ramsey a few times, and he's got some pretty good ideas. And he says that you really should use a tax professional because on average, you will get back $800 more in refund or pay $800 less in tax than if you do it yourself. And he's right. Studies have been done to show that. In my case, I've been doing this now for 32 years. I have found that the average refund that we help our clients get, both federal and state, is on average $1,000 to $2,000 higher than if they did it themselves. I get clients every single day that say, well, we thought this was going to be easier. We started tax season last week. Monday of last week was the beginning of tax season. We have had more phone calls in the past week for people asking for help than all of last year combined. It's amazing, isn't it? So people are finally getting the idea that they might need some help on this one. And yet, this is supposed to be simplification. Tax simplification. Has anybody seen the new tax form? The new 1040. The new 1040 is the size of this. 2018 Form 1040. And by the way, there is no 1040EZ. There is no 1040A anymore. It's now 1040. And it's the size of this. And we have 6 schedules that are attached to this in addition to all the other schedules that the IRS has had for years and years and years. And there's a brand new tax return that's coming out next year. And that's called the 1040 SR for seniors. Brand new one for seniors. You'll be, if you're 65 and older, you'll be able to use this new form. It's going to be like a 1040EZ for those who do not itemize. But it's going to be called a 1040 SR. Brand new. Gym membership. How many times have people come to me and go, hey, Bob, can I write off my gym membership? The answer is yes, you can, under this condition. If you have not joined a gym, if you're not a current member of a gym, and the doc says you need to join a gym for weight loss, for rehabilitation, that doctor's orders will allow your gym membership to be tax deductible. How about that? And yet, if you read the code, it says gym memberships are not tax deductible. They are, though. You have to read the exception. Let's say you have a reason to go to a medical conference. You have HIV, you have cancer, you have some debilitating disease, and you want to learn more about this disease. If you go to that conference so that you're more knowledgeable, the entire cost, food, air, hotel, car rental, is tax deductible as a medical expense. And if you need someone to go with you as a caregiver, their expenses are deductible as well. So I want you guys to be aware, all these things are deductible that a lot of people don't know about. Service dogs. How many times have you heard people say, I want to write off my cat. Wish I could write off my dog. Wish I could write off my parrot, right? You can. If these animals are service animals, you can write them off as a medical expense. And I'm talking the food for the animals. I'm talking the vet bills, all their grooming, all the entire cost of the animal is a medical tax deduction. Now, I tell you this because on the federal tax return, in order to get a deduction, you have to hit a floor. 7.5% of your income, right, has to exceed that floor. But on the state of Arizona, it's 100% deductible. There is no floor. Worse yet, Arizona hasn't made up its mind as to whether they're going to follow the new rules or the old rules. And being the progressive state that we are, they'll probably wait until December and make it retroactive to January. And then we'll have more work amending everybody's tax returns. So what we're doing in our office is we're going ahead and using the suggested new rules, because even though the governor wants the new rules, the legislature doesn't want the new rules only because they want the money allocated differently than he does. He says he wants the money to be used for the teachers. The legislature says, no, we want the money to be used for infrastructure. So there's this big in-battle between the governor and the legislature as to what this extra money is going to be used for. And since they can't decide, they won't actually submit a bill for the governor to sign. So if we're not sure, let's do nothing, right? So if that happens, and the new rules are passed, which I believe will eventually happen, and if anybody has been using the old rules on their state tax return, they're going to have to go back and amend their tax return and pay more taxes. So what we're doing is we're saying we're going to go ahead and use the new rules for those people who want to file their returns right now, because literally 30% of our clients today are saying, put me on extension. We'll worry about it in the fall, because by then they'll have a decision made. So a lot of people are going ahead and filing their returns using the new rules, because if they don't follow the new rules, we'll be able to amend the return and get a bigger refund for them. So I think it's better to be a little conservative in this case, maybe pay a few dollars extra on the new rules, assuming that's what's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, you'll get a refund. And here's another benefit. When the federal or state government have to pay you a refund after the due date of the return, which is April 15th, they have to pay you interest. How about that? Anybody know what the interest rate is that the government has to pay you? No. That's what the banks are paying you. The banks are paying you 0.5%. The government is paying 4% interest right now. That's a damn good savings account. So a lot of people are literally filing their taxes later in order to get a refund with interest. I had a client last year. He received a $30,000 refund. First, I got nervous about that. I'm like, why do you want such a big refund? And he said, well, it's my savings account. I'm going, you're not getting any interest. I said, I'll tell you what. You give me 30 grand, I'll give it back to you next year. How's that? Because that's exactly what he's doing. He's given the federal government $30,000 too much, and they're giving it back to him next year. I tell my clients, anytime you want to give away money, see me. But they actually pay interest. State and federal government actually pay interest. There's, with the new law, no deduction for miscellaneous expenses. Now, what the heck are miscellaneous expenses? Like paying for a tax preparer, like paying for an attorney, like having a trust prepared. How about employee business expenses? How many people do you know get a W-2 at work, and yet they have to spend their own money to get the job done they're due? Teachers. The average teacher spends $1,000 a year out of their pocket to pay for supplies the school doesn't provide. How about police officers? They buy their Batman utility belt, they buy their uniforms, right? Their boots, their shoes. They have to pay for that. That's not given to them. They get an initial allowance for that, just like the military. If you're an officer, we get an initial allowance, $300, when we become an officer. And after that, you're responsible for paying for all your uniforms. So if you're in the military, in the past, if you bought uniforms, we were able to write those off on our Schedule A under miscellaneous itemized deductions. How about your safe deposit box expenses? How about investment expenses? For instance, you pay Merrill Lynch, you pay Raymond James, advisor fees. All of these were tax deductions in the past that are gone today. So for 2018, these are no longer tax deductible. A lot of my clients are media. Because I'm on television a lot, the media people come to me because they figure that I know something they don't know. Some of those media personalities have to pay an agent, like an actor, a percentage of their pay. Most of the anchors you see on television are paying agents fees. Those agents' fees are no longer deductible. And I remember distinctly when this was coming about, I was watching CNBC one morning, and Joe Kernan, I love Joe Kernan, he's just funny as hell because he's just in your face. And he was talking to Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury. And he is a media personality, Joe is, and he has to pay these agency fees. And he's sitting there talking to the Secretary of the Treasury on live TV, and he goes, "So, Mr. Secretary, what's this business about taking away our agency fees?" And the Secretary very calmly looked at him and turned and said, "If you want to take your agency fee, start a business." So this new tax law is all about helping people and encouraging people to start a business. That's what the new tax law is supposed to be about. Forget all the optics of the politics behind it. The reality is it's supposed to encourage people to start businesses because that is the backbone of the country. In fact, I think I've heard it maybe 100 times when politicians talk about small business is the backbone of America. It really is. So these new tax laws are encouraging people to start new businesses. Now, I said to you a second ago that the police officers have to spend this money in order to buy uniforms and keep their equipment in good shape, but they get no deduction for it. How many police officers do you know work off duty? Lots of them. Look at construction sites. Look at public events. You'll see a police officer there. Often these police officers are not working as police officers on duty. They're working off duty. Because in order to get the contract or the permit from the city, county, or state, you have to have a police officer there to monitor the event. So the event holders, the construction contractors, have to pay police officers off-duty terms, which on average is about $50 an hour. Not bad. And these police officers get 1099s. So if you're getting a 1099, in the past, we would put that on their tax return, take all those expenses they incurred for their uniforms and such, and put it on the Schedule A, Form 2106 for employee business expenses. Now, what I'm encouraging my clients to do is put it on Schedule C. So these miscellaneous expenses, for years and years and years, we put on a Schedule A, which, by the way, limited the amount of the deduction they got. is now being moved over to a Schedule C, giving them a bigger tax deduction to begin with. So if you know somebody who's getting a W-2 and they have to spend some of their own money in order to get the job done, have them create a Schedule C for that, as long as they get some 1099 income, some off-duty income, some freelance income. I told that especially to my media personnel. And I saw one of my clients go on the radio. And I saw another one of my clients start writing for a magazine. So the word got out, in addition to their television anchoring. Let's see, what else do we have here? A little history. He'd mentioned my military service. I did sign up in Vietnam. I don't look as old as I am. I have a picture of Dorian Gray on my wall at home. But I served 8 years enlisted time, got out of the service, went to school down in Tucson, U of A, because I was down at Fort Huachuca doing a joint task force operation, and received a degree, went back in the service as an officer, and spent 28 years as an officer, working for the National Guard and the Reserves. I was deployed about 12 times. Hurricane Katrina, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, all kinds of little sunny beach spots. Desert Storm, Desert Shield. And yes, I went from private to full bird colonel. Took a little bit of work. All right, another deduction that people aren't aware of. I'm basically going through the book here and talking about deductions that you may or may not be aware of. But if you have a question that you want answered, a tax question, free advice, let me know and I'll be happy to answer the question for you, okay? So, renting your house. We've had the Super Bowl here a couple times now. And one of my friends, Scott Passmore on Channel 3, I went on the air and I was talking about renting your house out. And he goes, what? You can do that? And I said, yeah, if you rent your house out for the Super Bowl and you rent it out for less than 15 days, no matter how much income you get, it's tax-free. And you don't have to report it. Completely tax-free. So Scott Passmore jumped all over that, rented his house out for 10 days during the last Super Bowl. Got $3,000 a day. 30 grand. Completely tax-free. He had a family move into his house for 10 days. I said, woof, you are a trusting soul. But what they do is they have organizations that will make sure there's sufficient insurance so they don't rip you off or break up your stuff. You obviously want to take your valuables and lock them away somewhere. And then I asked him, I said, so where the heck did you stay? If they were renting your house, where did you stay? He said, well, I stayed with my girlfriend. I said, oh, okay, all right. But he got 30 grand completely tax-free. So if you rent your home out for less than 15 days, no matter how much you get for it, it's tax-free money. And I wanted you to be aware of that because, yet again, a lot of people aren't aware of that. Another new rule, mortgage interest deductions. This year, 2018, 2018 going forward, you can only write off mortgage interest on a loan up to $750,000. Now that sounds like a lot of mortgage. But we've got a lot of clients that have mortgages over $1 million. And they don't get a deduction for anything over $750,000 in debt. It used to be $1 million for the primary mortgage and $100,000 for a home equity line of credit. So you could get a tax deduction for interest on a mortgage of $1.1 million and no more. And even then we had clients that had bigger mortgages who live in California. Because I do tax returns all over the United States and all over the world. I have Israeli clients, Australian clients, Canadian clients, Italian clients, and then clients all over the country. So, in the past, people would use their homes like an ATM. And as they'd build equity in their homes, they'd go borrow money and refinance the house, and then they'd use that money to buy a car, go on vacation, pay for the kids' college. You can't do that anymore and get a deduction for it. That was taken away. And the reason why that was taken away should be obvious, because they don't want another 2008. They don't want people borrowing on the mortgages, having the mortgages skyrocket, and all of a sudden the values of the home drop below the value of the mortgage. Now, here's a little known law that the IRS never made public. If the value of your home drops below the mortgage that you owe on the home, you do not get a tax deduction for the interest. Now, how many people do you know had that happen in 2008, 9, and 10? A lot of people, right? The value of their home dropped below the mortgage on their house. There's no tax deduction for the interest if the value of your home goes below the mortgage that is owed. That's the law. They're saying that you're getting a double benefit out of this. They don't want you to get a tax deduction for that. But here's what happened. Not one single taxpayer was called on that. Not one. The IRS never enforced it. The IRS never came back and said, you can't write that interest off. I represented 3 clients in an audit where the value of the home went below the mortgage they owed on it. The IRS audited them and gave them the deduction for the interest. And I was like, that's... Because I was fully expecting them to say, nope, we're not going to allow this interest deduction because the value of the home went down. And they literally looked at me and said, we're going to allow it. So after the audit was done, I talked to the IRS agent, who, by the way, happens to be a friend of mine now. And I said to him, what the heck? And he goes, that's not something we really make public. Can you imagine the destabilization that would have occurred if all people knew they could no longer, I mean, first of all, the value of your house goes down. You owe more than the value of your home. And now you can't write the interest off on the tax, and you got no job, you have no money, so it's just like ding, ding, ding all at the same time. The IRS said, we're just going to let that one slide. So don't believe it when the IRS says the law is black and white. There's a whole lot of shades. There's 50 shades of gray, right? 50 shades of gray when you're talking to the IRS. And half the time, they are Christian gray. Non-cash tax deductions. Next subject. Non-cash contribution tax deductions. So you're giving away food, you're giving away clothes, you're giving away furniture, you're giving away equipment, not cash. What's the average tax deduction that most people take for that? Any clue? $250 to $500. That's exactly right. Why? Because from $250 to $500, you don't have to have any documentation to prove it. Above $500, you got to have receipts. How many times have we given away clothes to Goodwill, Salvation Army, Savers, Deseret Industries, and they give us a receipt? Anytime you ask for it, right? So here's what we suggest our clients to do. You take pictures of the items you're giving away. Why do you take pictures? To prove the condition of the items and to prove what items you gave away. You make a list. You get the receipt from the organization. And here's the rub. You get a much, much bigger tax deduction than the $500 that most of us claim. And why? If you can go to all the different websites that are out there, salvationarmy.org, Goodwill Industries, Deseret Industries, you will see that the amount that the federal government allows for non-cash contributions is almost 5 times bigger than you think it is. Now, our office spent 3 months going to every single website and creating an Excel spreadsheet. And on that Excel spreadsheet, we have everything that we found on the websites. We have a column for good condition, And we have a column for excellent condition. And of course, everybody gives away excellent stuff, right? And the pictures prove it. The average family who followed our tips, this happened last year, by the way, because we created this last year and made it available to all of our clients free, was $3,000. The average tax deduction for non-cash contributions was $3,000. One family had $4,600 and they were like, oh my God, I was going to claim $500. They didn't realize what the government allows. A paperback, a used paperback book. You know what the government allows for that? $1 for every book. And if you're like me, I read at least a book a week. Every hardback book you give away, $2. How about the t-shirts, the undergarments? The government gives you $2 for every t-shirt you give away. Your regular dress shirts, the government gives you $15 for a dress shirt. Holy cow. You believe that? It's amazing. If you guys want a copy of the Excel spreadsheet we put together for our clients, give me your business card, give me your information. My secretary will send it to you. It's free. Okay? It's amazing, though, the deductions that are out there and people don't even think about it. And they go, oh, you're too expensive. You're just too expensive. CPAs are too expensive. And I'm sure for those of us who are attorneys or CPAs or enrolled agents, if you think we're expensive, try the price of an amateur. Right? If you think education's expensive, try the price of ignorance. New rules, as Bill Maher says. I love watching that guy. He's funny. He's funny. New rules. I watch all the TV stations. And by the way, there's Fox News on the right. You got NBC or CNBC or MSNBC on the left. CNN. Dead center is a new TV station I've been watching recently, and I'm pretty impressed with it, called One American Network. You ever heard of that? Channel 347 on DirecTV. Right dead in the center. They give both sides and let you decide for yourself. I think that's pretty good. That's how I found out about South Dakota and Utah repopulating. 347, channel 347. All righty. New rules. So one of the things that President Trump wanted redone, updated, modified, is the required minimum distribution for anybody who's 70 and a half or older, right? His point is the mortality tables that are used haven't been updated since 2002. And we're living a little bit longer. So he wanted those updated. And they have to be done by the end of this month. Because he talked to the Department of Labor, Secretary of Labor, and the Secretary of the Treasury. And he said, I want these tables updated. And here's something else I want to see happen. A lot of people are working past 65, 66, 67 years old. Some past 70. They're still working. One, because they want to, and two, because they have to. He wants new IRA rules in place this year that will allow people 70 and older to contribute to an IRA as long as you're working. Because once you're 70 years old, you can't contribute to an IRA. Do you know that? That's right. You have to start taking money out. He also wants the required minimum distribution to be moved from 70 to 75. So you don't have to take it out until you're 75 and a half. So we're looking for those rules to come about this year, hoping that happens. Since I'm getting a little bit closer to that Medicare age, I want to see that happen. So we'll have no need to take money out until we're 75. We'll be able to continue putting money in from 70 to 75. And when we start taking money out, we will only have to take less money out. Isn't that nice? That'll be out pretty good. Hopefully that'll happen by the end of the year. Social Security benefits. Now, there was a policy called file and suspend that they stopped. Last year they stopped it because too many people finally caught on to that little trick where you were able to take half of your spouse's Social Security and then turn around and wait for yours to grow, and you take yours at age 70, right? Well, there is a modification still allowed for that. So let's talk about that. When you are 66 years old or older, and you want to start taking money out for Social Security purposes, if you're married and your spouse is of full retirement age, which right now is about 66. It could be 66 in 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, depending on when they were born. So if both of you are at full retirement age or later, one of you can go ahead and take your Social Security benefits, and what's still allowed, what's still available, is that the spouse can literally take half of your Social Security benefits without affecting your Social Security at all. So in other words, the two of you are getting 150% of the greater Social Security benefit. And then the one who's taking half can file for Social Security benefits and say, not file, I apologize. They're not going to file for Social Security benefits. They're going to simply take spousal benefits, and they're going to wait to take their benefits when they hit 70. You see that? So it's not file and suspend. It used to be what it was. Now it's file and wait. Okay? Because when the spouse who's taking half of the greater benefit is receiving their half, they don't have to actually file for their benefits until they hit 70 years old. And they'll get far, far more money. How much more? How about this? You get an 8% guaranteed increase for each year you wait. That's an 8% guaranteed return on investment. So if you're 66 years old and your spouse is taking Social Security, you can take half of your spouse's and he or she can get their 100%. Then from 66 to 70, you wait to draw on your Social Security, and you get an 8% increase for every year that you wait. That's a 32% increase, isn't it? From 66 to 70. And on top of that, if the government gives a cost of living increase along the way, you get that too. You get that COLA. That's exactly why they're going broke. And because they use the Social Security fund for other than Social Security, right? For other things. So I want you to be aware there are a lot of rules. How many combination of Social Security benefits are there out there? 1,265. For each couple, there are 1,265 different combinations. So you have to have somebody who knows what the hell they're doing giving you advice on what to do. I will say this, though. Social Security Administration has staffed up. It's no longer a 3 and 4 and 6 hour wait when you go into Social Security. I went in to help my grandmother with hers. We literally got there at 8 o'clock in the morning. We were out the door at 8:45. I was like, oh, this is great. It wasn't a line around the corner, which is what I'm used to. So they have realized we've got 10,000 people every day, 365 days a year, turning 65 years old for the next 18 years. That's the baby boomers. 10,000 people a day, every day, 365 days a year for the next 18 years. Who's going to pay for that Social Security? What kids? We're not even having kids. As she pointed out, we've got less repopulation going on, right? It hopefully will be the immigrants. I'm like, yeah, let them in, for crying out loud. Yeah. They're going to pay, right. Let them in, make them pay taxes. Oh, yeah. And that's another thing. Let's talk about nationalization of the currency. Do you know that every country in the world has nationalized their currency except us? We're the only country in the world that has not nationalized our currency. Hell, Germany's done it 3 times. That means that one day, Mexico did it in 1980. I'll give you a great example. I was down in Fort Huachuca in 1978. I was stationed down there. And I had a savings account in Mexico because the savings account in Mexico was paying me 16% interest. Holy cow. So I threw $5,000, and for an E6 in 1978, $5,000 is a lot of money. So I put $5,000 into a Mexican savings account, just sitting back all fat and happy. I wake up one day, and I find out that the Mexican government has nationalized their currency. I went, what? Are you kidding me? So what that meant was that $5,000 that I had down in the Mexican bank became $3,000. When they nationalize their currency, what that means is they wake up and say, your money's been devalued. It's not worth as much as it used to be as of today. Yep, get a haircut. Now, Cyprus is a country where the Russian mafia like to launder their money. And everybody knows it. Even the government of Cyprus knows it. So 5 years ago, Cyprus woke up one morning and said, anybody who has 100,000 euros or more in our banks just took a 28% haircut. We're keeping 28%. Just like that. A few bankers found themselves in the bottom of a pool, and life went on. Greece. You might know about this one. Greece had some economic issues about 6 years ago. And they basically said, in order to take money out of a Greek bank, you can only take 100 euros a day. And there were so many people that ran to the Greek banks to get their money out that there were lines around the corner. And what happened is, the Greeks don't use ATMs like we do, because they use cash. A lot of people in Europe, they use cash. They don't like to use these credit cards and ATMs. They want cash. So people had to go into the bank to get an ATM card or a debit card. So there was a line of people signing up for debit cards, and then there was another line of people signing up for ATMs to take money out. Now that was 6 years ago. It still exists today. If you have money in a Greek bank, you can only take 100 euros in cash out a day. That's it. That's another example of nationalizing the currency. Not familiar with India. You are correct. That's right. I remember that one. We actually did that in 1980 in America. We had a $1,000 bill. We had a $10,000 bill. And I'll bet no one's seen one. But they existed. And in 1980, they made them illegal. The $1,000 bill and the $10,000 bills no longer exist. The Treasury won't even admit that they had them, but there are some of us who can still remember them and have pictures. Yeah, if you can find them. Sorry? Oh my. The reason why they did that is because of the cocaine drugs. It's a lot harder to pass a lot of money in $100 bills than it is in $1,000 and $10,000 bills. And 1980 was like the peak of the cocaine Miami Vice bust, right? Era. And so people were walking around with briefcases, suitcases, duffel bags full of $1,000 bills and $10,000 bills. And so the government said, let's say $100 is the cap. It'll make it a lot tougher for them to operate in cash. And that's what happened in 1980. Extensions. Let's talk about tax extensions for a second and the benefit of tax extensions. So, when you extend your tax return, you actually cut down any penalty you may be hit with. You're going, wait a minute, why am I hit with a penalty? I'm filing an extension. The filing of the extension allows you 6 months to file your tax return late, not to pay your taxes late. And a lot of people are misunderstanding that. A lot of people think, well, if I file an extension, I don't have to file and I don't have to pay until October. That's not true. You don't have to file until October, but you will need to pay by April. Well, most people aren't going to do that because they don't know what they owe. So if you file an extension, the penalty that is charged to you is reduced from 5% per month, 5% per month up to 25%. It's reduced down to 0.5% per month. So that means instead of paying 25% penalty or 30% penalty plus interest, because they charge you interest on the penalties, plus interest on the taxes. So instead of paying such a huge penalty and interest on the penalty, you're only paying a very tiny penalty of like 4%, 5%. And the interest on that, which is really, really tiny. So a lot of people don't know that when you file an extension, it allows you extra time to file, but not extra time to pay. But here's another little trick. Anybody ever done a 1031 exchange? You familiar with that? It's called a like-kind exchange. Yeah. Yeah, 1031s can only be done in real estate now. Used to be on cars and trucks and equipment, but now it can only be on real estate. So what some people will do is they will buy a piece of rental property or office building, whatever commercial use, rental use. Then it goes up in value. They'll sell this real estate, and now they have this big profit. They go, I don't want to pay taxes on that profit right now. So if they take that money and they reinvest that money into another piece of real estate within 180 days of selling the old property, they get to defer all that profit until they sell the new building they just bought. So I've got clients that will buy real estate, let it go up, sell it, buy another piece of real estate, let it go up, sell it, buy another piece of real estate, and they've done this for 30 years. And they've got huge profits. And then they die. Now when they die, their beneficiaries get to inherit it at stepped up value, so nobody pays taxes on that money at all. But let's say you're not one of those people that die. You buy real estate. It goes up in value. I'm not talking your house, by the way. Your house is a different game. I'm talking rental property or business property. You buy real estate. It goes up in value. You sell it. You reinvest it into another piece of property. This 180 days is a very tight 180 days. Doesn't matter if it ends on a weekend or a holiday, you still have to close on that day. But here's another little trick. If you filed an extension on your tax return, that 180 days gets extended to the extension date as well. So you actually have more time to reinvest the money. Isn't that nice? And this is a little trick that a lot of people aren't aware of. Some people know about the 1031s. People in real estate know about it. People who invest know about it. But most people don't know if you extend your tax return after you have sold that property and not done your taxes yet and not reinvested it, you can actually extend that 180 days by another 6 months. So I want you to be aware of that. All these little tricks are in here, man. Looking for a tax preparer. I love this part. CPAs, enrolled agents, and attorneys are the 3 licensed professionals who can represent you before the IRS. Nobody else. Do you know that? Nobody else. Not H&R Block, not Liberty Tax. Okay? They can't represent you before the IRS. Only CPAs, enrolled agents, and attorneys. Licensed professionals. They can represent you at all levels of the IRS. And yet, so many people go to the unlicensed preparers because they are cheap. And you get what you pay for. I tell my clients, if I don't save you more than I charge you, you don't need me. I tell every one of my clients that. If I don't save you more than I charge you, you don't need me. You can go and see if somebody is a CPA, because I hear this all the time. My CPA, my CPA, my CPA, and the people are coming to me going, I want to use you. My CPA is not doing this or that, the other thing. And I go, what was the other preparer's name? And I find out they're not even CPAs. Because people think they're CPAs. Let me explain to you why that happens. In California, you can't even say you're an accountant unless you're a CPA. You can't even say you're an accountant unless you're a CPA. Now, you can say you're a tax preparer. You can say you're a bookkeeper, but you can't use the word accountant because accountant is part of the certified public accountant name. So in California, you can't say you're an accountant unless you're a CPA. It's actually a crime. Come to Arizona, and how many people are moving from California to Arizona? Lots of people, yeah? So people come to Arizona, and they see accountants. So they assume they're CPAs because that's the rule in California. What's the rule in Arizona? Arizona is the wild, wild west. In Arizona, you don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have a license. You don't have to have knowledge. And you can call yourself an accountant or a counselor. How about that? It's perfectly legal. Call yourself an accountant or a counselor. So you get all these people from California coming to Arizona, and they're looking for a tax preparer or a financial advisor, and they see accountant, they go, well, it must be a CPA. And then 2 or 3 years later, after they get in trouble, they go to a CPA, or they're referred to a CPA, and they find out the person they were using isn't even a CPA. That happens a lot, by the way. I mean, that happens more than you realize. Okay. First-time abatement. First-time abatement. If you get penalized, there are 3 kinds of penalties that the IRS will actually relieve you of. Abate. And you have to say in your request, I am requesting a first-time abatement. Okay, FTA. In the Army, that means something else. So, the first-time abatement is for failure to file, failure to pay, or failure to deposit. So if you are hit with a penalty because you didn't file your taxes on time, or you didn't pay on time, or you didn't deposit on time, like estimated taxes or payroll taxes, if you haven't done that in the last 3 years, you can ask the IRS for an abatement and they will give it to you. Now, they're not going to offer it to you. They're not going to say, hey, you haven't done anything wrong for 3 years. How about we just relieve this? You have to ask for it. But as long as you haven't done anything from the last 3 years that's wrong, you can ask for a first-time abatement and get it relieved. So, good example. I had a medical group, 4 doctors. They had a partnership. They didn't file their tax return on time. The penalty is $200 per partner per month, up to $15,000. So this partnership was hit with a $9,000 penalty for not filing their tax return on time. They didn't file extensions. They forgot all about it. And they went, oh my God, what are we going to do? So they gave it to me. I asked for a first-time abatement, completely relieved of the $9,000. How much did I charge for that? I should have. I charged him $1,000. You know that old Henry Ford joke, right? He's fixing the Boilermaker. Something, the Boilermaker's not working. Henry Ford comes in and he looks at it and taps the top of the ding thing and it starts working. And he goes, oh, thank you. Please send me a bill. Henry Ford sends him the bill. The bill says $10,000. And the guy's going, what? Can you send me an itemization? The itemization is, sure, hitting the Boilermaker to fix it. $9,999, right? No, it's the other way around. I'm screwing it up. Knowing where to hit the Boilermaker, $9,999, and hitting the Boilermaker was $1. Yeah. So the knowledge is what the important point is. All right, I'm going to let you go. I got all kinds of good stuff here I can keep on going with. One last thing, and I'll let you go. There is no tax deduction for children anymore. There's no tax deduction for people anymore. You can write off your dog and your cat if they're service animals, but you can't write off people anymore, okay? But here's what you do get. If the children are under 17, you get a $2,000 tax credit. Used to be $1,000, now it's $2,000, right? And if you have children that are 17 and older, maybe mom, maybe dad, maybe an aunt and uncle living with you, they get a $500 credit. And that's brand new this year. So the $2,000 credit is a doubling from last year, but the $500 credit is brand spanking new. So if you have somebody that you're taking care of who is 17 or older, you actually get a $500 tax credit that you didn't get in the past. And lastly, adoptions. When you adopt somebody, you can get about a $13,000 non-refundable tax credit against your taxes when you adopt somebody. And they actually give you about $14,000 or $15,000 if it's special needs children. Now here's the thing I want to bring home. The definition of special needs doesn't include just like the physical issues like the Down syndrome and so forth, or the disabled children. It also can include those who've been abused. Special needs definition includes abused children. So when you're talking to somebody about adoption credit, make sure you read the adoption papers, because if they're special needs children, if they've been abused, they qualify as special needs children. And with that, thank you very much.